Hello there everyone. Today's tutorial is going to be about how you can make your own beaded Kumihimo pattern. And these are just a few examples of ones that I've made previously. So I've got my hedgehogs here, and then some cherry blossoms with leaves on them, American flag inspired, and then just some basic flowers but on both sides there in different colours. And these have all been made using the same technique. So it's just how I personally like to make up patterns for my Kumihimo braids with beads on them. So I'm going to show you how to do that today, and hopefully from this tutorial you'll be able to make your own patterns up after this. So if you want to learn how to do that, then keep watching. So these are the things that I'm going to demonstrate with today. Now here I have my round Kumihimo disc because we're making a round braid. And then here I have a selection of some beads. These are 6-0s of 4mm beads, and they're quite nice to use for a beaded Kumihimo braid. You can always use many different kinds and sizes of beads as well. And I just have a selection of some colours here that I'm going to be using. Now as for the cord, I've got my black S-long cord here. It's a 0.4mm in thickness, and I just really like using this for my Kumihimo braids with beads on, because it's really nice and strong, and it also will go pretty much through any hole on most beads that you'll find. So let's get it together and let's get started. So before we get into how we make our beaded patterns here, what I just want to recommend is that you do a little bit of beaded Kumihimo work before you start making your own patterns. So for instance, I recommend that you do say a basic one with no pattern on it, just to kind of learn the structure of your braids as well. That's kind of why I recommend you do a few at least before you start making your own pattern, because you can kind of get to know the structure of it, and then as you're making it, try and pay attention as well to see where the bead goes as you're doing it. So just a basic one I would recommend, and then you can move on to something a bit more, well, you get a pattern in it but still simple. So this is basically, this side is just polka dots, you can say, and this is just striped. So that's like the next step you can move on to, and then you can move on to things like making some flowers or something. So basically I recommend following some patterns that you can find elsewhere and build up those braids. So pay attention as you're making them, so you learn the structure of them, but also kind of learn where the beads go along the way. And then it'll make it easier for when you want to start making your own pattern as well. So I recommend doing this first, because then you'll also have those braids to refer back to when you then start making your own pattern. So then what I do as the first thing is cut my cord ready. So the S-long that I showed that I'm going to be using, what I like to do is, say if I'm working on a bracelet length that I want to do, what I do is I cut these 4 lengths of about 1 meter each. So like I said, this is going to be about bracelet length if that's the pattern that I want to do for a bracelet. So I cut these, then I fold them in half. So put all the ends together like that, find the middle of it, and then I put a regular knot here just to kind of tie them all together so they don't move anymore. And that'll also be the center point we're going to put through the disc. And then what I've done here is I'll just attach a little piece of wire, just something to kind of help me grab onto it to pull through the disc as well, as we're going to be making the braid. So I have 4 lengths here, and these are going to turn in, because we're doubling them over, to our 8 working cords on the disc. So we then need to get a disc out here and then attach this cord to it. So I'll put this piece of wire where I have my knot as well down through the middle, and then just distribute these along the sides of your disc. So because this is an 8-strand braid, I'm not going to worry about the numbers, I'm just going to focus on the dots there and put 1 cord on each side of every dot. So this is just like starting a regular 8-strand braid. Distribute them all around evenly, because then this is going to be the setup at the beginning versus start making the braid. So like this. So you can see we have 1 cord on each side of every dot all the way around. And then now what I'm going to do before I start adding any beads into this, we need to make a small section of just the braid first. So first of all, to kind of give a little bit of stability to the braid, but also we need to think about how we're going to finish things off at the end. So I always make just a small section of braid first. So I start from my top left one, bring that down, stay on the left side, then take the bottom right one, bring that up and stay on the right side. This is just how I work, and then turn it for the next pair. So just like a regular 8-strand braid with just cord. So we need to do this for a little while until we have about 1 or 2 centimeters of braid with just the cord before we start adding in the beads. So I've now continued and made my small section of braid there, so you can see it coming out of the back, so just about a centimetre or so. And then what we need to do now is start adding in the beads. Now this is where then I'm going to show you how you can build up your own pattern, how I do it at least. Obviously the regular way, if you're familiar making beaded braids from other patterns, what you're probably familiar with is that you'll have a setup picture or whatever you're looking at that'll show you how to feed on the beads onto each strand basically. So you'll know what beads will need to go in each strand before you start adding them into the braid. So that's what you do, you fill up all the strands first before you start adding them in. That's obviously the kind of easiest way to do it if you already know the pattern. Now what we need to do now is make a pattern, so that's a little bit different. What I don't do exactly that. So I don't fill up all my strands here with beads ahead of time, because really that is just guesswork, and it can end up taking a lot of time if you've got to fill them all, take them off, fill them all, take them off, if it doesn't turn out quite right the first time. Obviously there's probably some kind of mathematical equation that you can use, but I'm really not clever enough for that. So I'm going to show you how I do it. So I'm not going to fill up all the strands with beads here, I'm going to add them as we go. So then what I usually do is I decide ahead of time what colours that I want to use in my beads, and then now that I've got to the point where I'm going to start adding them in, I get my beads ready out in just a few piles here. So just they're ready so I can keep taking them whenever I need to. For now I'm going to start out with the black and the white here, and I want to start making kind of like a polka dot pattern just for this one, a fairly simple one, and show you how you can do that. So I've got my black and my white here. So what I'm going to do is we're still making the basic 8-strand braid. Now we're just adding beads every time we cross a strand over. So I'm going to take my top left one here, is the next one that I'm due to take. By the way, this is all the same if you work from the top right or from the bottom, either one as well. It's all the same principle. This is just to show you how you can add in beads when making your own pattern. So I'm due to take this one, and obviously now there's no beads on my length here. So what I'm going to do is add them in as I go, just like I said. So I take this one, before I release it I like to put my bead on. What I want to do is start out with black. I want the black to be kind of the base colour, and then the actual polka dots to be the white ones. So I'm going to add this black one on. Oops, get a new one. Because I know the very beginning part of my braid I want to be all black, just before we get into the actual pattern. So I'm going to add it on there, let it drop all the way down, just like we're doing a regular beaded Kumihimo braid. Release my cord, and then let it drop down the middle. Make sure to tuck it in underneath there, and then place your cord back in the bottom. So that's the first bead. Move to the bottom to finish off this pair. Do the same thing. You kind of just keep having to put your disc down, grab your cord, the end of it, and add a bead on. Add the bead that you think you need, so the colour that you think you'll need to fit in with the pattern. Let it drop all the way down, release it, and tuck it in. Just like that. So now we have the two first beads on, and those are black. Going to continue still, go to the next pair, because like I said, I want the whole beginning of the braid to be black to start off the actual pattern before I add in the polka dots themselves. So just keep doing this. Add your bead, make sure it's tucked in underneath there, and just keep trying to have your cords nice and taut here. Take the next one, this is the fourth one, slowly building up the very beginning of the beaded part. Add it to this bottom right one, that's my next one I'm due to take. Release it, let it drop, and tuck it in. So now I have four, and we've kind of got a little square there right at the bottom. You'll be able to see on your own. It's going to keep going for a bit. So basically every time I'm due to take a new cord, I want to add a bead to it, because that's what we would normally do as well with a regular bead at Kumihimo braid. Here we're just doing it as we go to figure out the pattern. The next one to finish off this pair, that'll be the sixth one. just like that. And slowly building up the very beginning part of the braid that's going to be all black. And I kind of like to do this in general with pretty much every pattern that I make. Just kind of build the beginning before I start going into the actual pattern. So like this. Grab another black one. Obviously how much you want to do is up to you. So there we go. So we can slowly start to see as well on the back, you'll be able to see that your beads are coming out. Your braid is coming out continuously, but now with beads as well. Just starting after that first section we made, just with a cord. I think I'm actually going to start the polka dots now, just to show you as well. So that's another thing, that's why I recommended doing a few braids before you start making your own pattern. Just to get a bit familiar with how the whole thing works. And you'll see from above as well, you kind of will always have a bit of a square with then another layer of beads underneath that on the sides. And then you kind of learn how to fill in the spaces properly. So when I add in my first polka dot, so I take a white bead, add that to my next cord, let that drop all the way down there, and then what I'm just going to do is show you up close how it looks as well, so you can get a better idea. So in the middle here where you can see all the beads underneath your cords, you might be able to see that the very top ones you have a little square, or you're always going to have 4 beads once you've made a finished pair. And then on the sides there, it's kind of a layer underneath that, you have one on each side sticking out. It'll become more obvious when we use some other colours as well. So I take my white one that I'm due to take, and this one now, that's another thing you kind of get used to as you're making more braids, where you take this cord and you cross it over where that bead is going to sit. If you look from the back side, you can kind of see you have a space there where this cord is now that I'm moving, right there. So you know that when you drop this bead, that's going to fill in that space. So that's where you kind of learn as you do more and more, depending what pattern you want, to add the colour that you need. So that's the first one. And then because I want a quite even polka dot look, I want the same thing on the other side, because these two, the one I just took here, so the top left one, bring that down. Now I'm going to do the bottom right one from the same pair that I'm still working on here. That's going to be the exact opposite side of the braid. So basically the 2 white ones are going to be exactly opposite each other. So I'm going to make sure that that one's white as well. Like that. Let it drop all the way down, and again we have that little space on this side of the braid at the top here, and basically filling in that little hole with this bead now. So as you can see there, more clearly now with the white ones, they're directly opposite each other, because obviously the braid is going down the middle and your beads are filling up on the outside of the braid. Moving on, because it's polka dots I want, we now need to make black ones again. So we don't have any of the white ones right next to each other. So just grab your next cord that you're due to take, add your bead, let it drop down, and then you now have that space again on this side where this cord crosses over, where that bead is going to end up sitting then. Again, the one from the same pair. So my top left one, I just took the one from the same pair, that's my bottom right one in this case. It's going to sit directly opposite side of the braid and fill in the space on the opposite side there. So it's always something to keep in mind as well. So say for instance you wanted a pattern as well where you only wanted something on one side of the braid, you can just make sure of that as you go, to keep an eye that you only ever do it on that one side as you're building it. But then here we can still see the white ones, and like I said, it's a polka dot one. I don't want any other white ones to go up against white ones that are already there. So I still need to do black ones here to basically cover up the tops of these white ones. So continue with the black ones. So this black one now is going to sit on a little bit on top of that white one on this side. Take a black one on the other as well to finish off this pair. Just like that. Fill in that gap on the opposite side, directly opposite the one you just put on. Turn it again. Now we can see the white ones are kind of the bottom layer that we can see now, because we have a little square of the black ones on top and the white ones are actually the layer below that. But we can still see them, so I'm still going to need to add black ones to cover them up. Continue just adding your beads as you go. So it's a little bit, in a sense, it's kind of a bit time consuming doing it this way, adding your beads like this, but this is kind of how you build up the pattern the best way possible, because then when it's done, obviously you've done the pattern, if you've done it the way you like it. Whereas if you were to do it the other way, like I explained, where you would normally add beads to all your lengths of cord and then build up your braid, if it was wrong, you're going to keep having to take it apart, do it again, and possibly until you get it right. And it's a lot more difficult, in my opinion, to get it right that way, because it's a lot of guesswork really. So there we go, I add another black one. So now we can kind of see the white ones are pretty much covered up at the top here. You can just see a hint of them, but that's natural enough. But the actual beads themselves, so we have basically 6 black ones on top now. I'm going to turn it for the next pair again, and this is where I want to start keeping an eye. What I also always like to do as I'm building it is refer back to look on the back side basically. So look at where the braid is coming out, because you can get a better look at how the pattern looks properly on the braid as you're making it. Now I can see the next cord that I'm due to take are these two, so it'll be this one, the top left one. So that means if I go to the back, that's this one right here, and that's going to fill in that space sitting right there, the little gap that we have. And if you look on the back, you can see that gap is straight in between the previous 2 white ones that we added. That means that I want to add another white one there, because that's kind of going to be the opposite then of these two to create that polka dot pattern. So I know now that I want to add a white one. Let that drop all the way down, tuck it underneath, and then that sits on top. Finish off this pair that we're in the middle of. Again, remember the 2 cords that you're moving in the same pair that you're working with are directly opposite each other on the braid structure. So that means this one's got to be white as well, because I want the polka dot pattern to be symmetrical. Obviously you don't have to do that, but if you want it to be symmetrical, you can keep that in mind. Let that drop down, tuck it in and place it back in. So now we have 2 white ones on top again there. So those are our next polka dot ones. Same as before, we then need to cover these up with black ones before we do the next white ones, because we want to achieve that polka dot pattern. So now I'm just going to continue with some black ones, just like before, until basically we can't see these white ones properly from the top anymore. Tuck it in, remembering the other one from the same pair that we're working on is straight opposite in the braid structure. So we're basically on the other side of the braid, if you can call it sides, because obviously it's a round braid, but like that. If you can kind of see, you're going to end up having a front and a back if you want that type of pattern. That's something you'll get familiar with as well. Continue with the black ones, because I can still see the white ones. So as you can see, I'm just, every time I'm taking a new cord, I'm adding a bead in, and it is a bit time consuming, but this is the best way that I found to build up a pattern when making one from scratch. Because it's easier then as well, if you've added a couple of beads and you're not happy, you can just take a couple of beads off and then do it again, instead of having to take everything apart. If you add beads to all the lengths of cord in guesswork basically. See, we're getting there again. I've added now 4 black ones on top here, so we have that little square of black ones with just them white ones on the layer below again. So these ones should be the ones that cover them up to fill in that gap. Just like that, the one side, you can see it's covered that up now. The other side, which is directly the opposite side of the braid structure. Let that drop down and tuck it in. And then you can see we now again have an all black top there. So if we look on the back, how the braid is looking, we can start to see that it's a nice polka dot pattern. So the 2 first ones we added were these 2 down here. Then we just added the last 2 white ones just like that. So basically nicely spaced in between, so they're all very symmetrical, which in this case I want for the polka dot pattern. So you can see kind of those 2 on the sides, and then you look at the other way, you can see those 2 on the sides. So that's how I'm building up this pattern. And just like before, now with this we only have black ones on top here. This is where I want to add in my next polka dot pattern. So white one to fill in the space that we have right there. Because then what you'll also be able to see is something else when I've added these. That'll be quite handy for making different patterns as well. Because we just added a white one in that pair. The same pair here, I'm going to add a white one for that as well. Just like that. And then now, because we have those 2 white ones, I'm just going to continue with the black. Again, to basically cover up these white ones, to then add in the next pair of white to make my polka dot pattern. And then I'm just going to add this and show you in the back what I was just talking about. Add the black one in, tuck it in, put your cord in, and then on the back here, like I just said, you have the 2 first white ones there, the next 2 white ones, if you twist the braid around, and then the 2 white ones I just added. If you have a look, you can see the first 2, and then if you skip the next 2, the 2 that I just added then as well, they're pretty much placed in exactly the same place on the braid. So in this pattern, for instance, because I'm making them so they're quite even against each other, these next ones, the white ones that I'm going to add after the ones I just added, are going to be equal to the ones in the middle there. So the first ones, you're looking from the side, those 2, same place as the top 2. So if you look from the side for the middle ones there, so the second pair that I added, the next ones I'm going to add are going to be equivalent to that, but just further up. So that's also how I'm going to achieve that very even look to it. I'll give it a nice polka dot effect. But that's also a really good thing to know, say for other braid patterns that you want to do, that you have these. So basically if you look from this side, these 2 beads are going to be in the exact same place. So if you can run a straight line up, because naturally the braid itself is kind of like a twist, so as you can see if you follow the beads along, they're kind of going in a twist pattern. If you add them like this, these 2 white ones, you can draw a straight line up through the braid, and you can use that for many different types of braid patterns that you want to do as well with your beads. So this is then the polka dot pattern. You can just keep going like this, and this is just basically the basics of how I want to add in my beads along the way to create the pattern that I want to do. So I've now kept going with the polka dot pattern there for a little bit, just to be able to show you a bit more of what it's going to end up like. So this is also more to show you what I was meaning, and you can see these on each side, the white ones here, the polka dot pattern, you kind of can make a straight line. If you continue as well, it'll make a straight line up, so you can really make some interesting things with that. And you can see as well every opposite side is the same, so that one is the same as the exact opposite side and that side there. So this is just the polka dot pattern, and again obviously it's the same principle whatever pattern you're making. What I'm going to do now is continue just into a different pattern, because that's something you can do as well. along the same braid you can easily change the pattern throughout as well. So I'm going to show you that now. You just continue the exact same way. I'm going to do a bit of that twist pattern now. So basically what I'm going to be doing is following the twist on the braid in this case. And then for this I've just changed up my colours a little bit. I'm still using the black one, but then I'm just using this kind of pink one as well, just to be able to show you the difference a little bit more clearly. So to then show you the different pattern as well, because you can easily change up the pattern as you go from one to the next, it's completely fine as well, obviously if that's what you want to do with yours. So as you can see on the top, you'll always find that this 8-strand braid, when you're adding beads, you're going to kind of have this square on the top consisting of 4 beads. So the top 4 ones are going to form a square, and then you're going to have kind of on the next layer down 1 on each side. So you're going to always be able to see 6 beads on the top there, but just placed a bit differently. So that's why as well I recommend doing a couple other beaded braids first with other patterns, just to get a bit familiar with that, because that can tell you as well a lot how to place your beads on top here by knowing how they sit, and then where the next bead you're going to add, where that's going to sit compared to those. So to move into that twist pattern then, the next one I'm going to take, I'm just going to continue with the black one to begin with. Just like that. Add that in, because that's going to fill in that space on the side of that square from the 4 beads on top. So like that. And then now I need to continue this pair that I'm in the middle of on the other side, but obviously now I'm just using 2 colours to make these spirals. You can use more as well, so you can use 3 colours or whatever colours you want to do. Because I'm using 2, what we've got to be aware of is that basically what you'll find as you're making your braid, you'll kind of have 6 spaces around the braid. So say when you're doing a spiral like I'm doing here, we're going to have 6 separate rows to the spiral. So that means I'm using 2 colours. So the one I'm just doing on here, this spiral, the beginning of this one is going to be black and going to continue all the way up. The one on the opposite side has got to be the other colour, because it's going to go black, and then in my case pink, so black, pink, and then black and pink. So therefore, because I'm using the 2 colours in this case for this spiral, I need to take the pink one now. So I just took a black one to finish off this pair. So the bead is going to sit directly opposite, on the opposite side of the braid. I'm going to use a pink one. You can see it's going to sit right there. Place that in. So basically if you think of these as the polka dots, you can kind of think of each individual pair as the polka dots. They're going to be sitting directly opposite each other on the braid. So just look at the first ones here, and these 2. They sit directly opposite each other. So the ones I've just added as well, the black one, directly opposite that I've added a pink one. So moving on to the next one. This bead I'm adding now is going to end up sitting next to the pink one. I can tell there because that's where I have the space right at the top. I have my 4 beads on the top there, including the pink one. Those are the ones forming the square. I have a space on this side that fits in with this card that I'm due to take now. So because I'm using the 2 colours, I know that every other one has got to be black, pink, and because this space is right next to the pink, I know that this one has to be black. Just like this. Let it drop down, tuck it in, and then that is sitting right next to the pink. Now to finish off this pair, it's the same principle again, because this one down here is going to fill in that space, and that is right next to the very first black one we added. So this one has to be pink, and also because it's directly opposite the one we just added in the same pair here, and because it's, like I said, there's kind of 6 separate lines to the spiral. So like this. So I have my 4 beads at the top again, forming that kind of square look. 2 of them are the pink ones on the one side here, other 2 down here are black. So moving to the next pair, I have space here in between the 2 pink ones, that we gotta fill that one in now, and then a space between the 2 black ones down here. So that means the space in between the pink ones has obviously got to be black. Like this. Add it, drop it down. And when we place it there, filling in the space, we can see it's going to be placed right in between the two pink ones, just how we want it to be. The bottom one here, the space on that side, is in between the two blacks. So that means for this one, I want to add a pink. So as you can see, with every pair that we've done, the first one we did was black, and then the other one in the same pair was pink, and it's been the same for every single one. So there we go. This is now the beginning of our spiral, and you can also see that because you can kind of see each colour now creates a bit of a triangle instead. Obviously we still have that pattern of the 4 beads on top, but just looking at the colours really. So every other one is the opposite colour. Continuing like this. This is now we're going to start building on the spiral. So basically what you want to do now is have a look on the colours of your beads here. The one that I'm due to take is this top left one. If I take that and bring it over, I can tell I have that space here that's going to get filled in now. It's going to come over like this. That means this bead that I'm going to add now is going to sit on top of the black one. That's in that corner there. So that means to get the spiral, because the braid naturally forms a spiral pattern, I need to have this one to be black as well to keep building on this line of the spiral. So I add a black to that cord. Like this, drop it down. So this one now is going to sit right on top of the black that's right below it, but just a little bit off to the side of it, because that's how we get that, the natural spiral that's going to be forming. On the opposite side here we have a pink one below that space we're going to fill in, so that means I want to add a pink one to this. Obviously this is just a case for the spiral pattern, but again it's just to give you an idea of the braid structure really, because it can really help them creating other patterns as well. Let that drop down. You can see the space it's filling in. It's going to sit right on top of the pink that's below. Tuck it in, and there we go. Move on to the next pair. The top left one, we now have again, just keep looking at kind of your 4 beads on top there, forming that square, and then you kind of have a gap on each side. And it's those gaps that you keep filling in. And then in case of the spiral pattern here, you just look, you can look at the bead that's underneath the space you're going to fill in, or you can look at the 2 beads it's going to go in between. And then you'll obviously need the opposite colour to them, or the same colour as the one that's underneath the space you're filling in. So it's going to be a black one again. And that means on the opposite side, it's going to be a pink one. Let it drop down, tuck it in. There we go. And then this, in this case of this pattern, it's basically just continuing the same thing. So now I need a black one again. And then on the other side as well, you slowly start to be able to see the spiral pattern forming. Obviously not so much at the beginning. It'll become more obvious the more we do. But once I've done this one, I'll just turn it around and show you. You need to add a pink one to this one now, because I have a pink one underneath, but also because this is the space, it's going to fill in the space that's in between the 2 black ones. So just like that. And then you just move on to the next pair. Now on the back, you'll be able to slowly start to see that. So as I said, it's not so obvious yet, but you can just slightly see that the beads are slightly off to one side of the previous one underneath it, of the same colour. And it's like that all the way around. And this is going to then, the more you build on this, turn into that spiral pattern naturally forming because of the braid structure. So just keep doing this to get the spiral pattern then. So I've now kept going for a little bit, doing the exact same thing to achieve that spiral pattern. And then just to show you how it then ends up looking, because I have a bit more now, you can actually properly see the spiral there that naturally forms, because this is how the braid structure actually is. So here you got the spiral, and then with the polka dots you can see you can achieve some straight lines as well by using those spots that create that straight line all the way up if that's what you want. So you can achieve very different effects and different types of patterns as well, just depending where you place your beads basically. So those are quite basic patterns. So you can then move on from these onto other ones as well. Say you can make flowers and all that. So I'm just going to show you that as well. So then in this case I'm going to use all the colours that I've used up till now to make the flower pattern. So I've still got both my black, my pink, and then I've taken just a few white as well. I'm going to still use the black for the background, the pink for the actual flower, and then just the white ones for the very centre of the flower. That's why we only need a couple of those. And again, this is just to demonstrate with. So now I'm going to go from this straight into making the flower pattern. So again, just like before, we can easily change from one pattern to the next. So just because I finished that one off, and because the black one's going to be my background, what I want to do as well is basically treat this as if it was the beginning of the beaded braid, the beaded section. So just do the same. I always want to just do a bit of the kind of background colour first, before I start adding in, say for instance, the flowers that I'm going to be doing in this case. So also just to cover up the colours that I've used in the previous in this case. Just to get a good background going. And it makes the actual pattern, so in this instance the flowers stand out a bit more as well, so they're not right at the end or the edge of the braid. So I'm just going to add a few black ones to begin with here. The exact same way, adding one at a time. Every time I bring up a new card to move, I'm going to add a bead to it. And obviously you can use whatever colours you want. These are just colours that I'm demonstrating with, to make it a little bit clear the difference between them and a bit obvious to see. So we're moving around. We can see we've almost covered up all the colours from the previous pattern there. Adding the black ones. Now this next black one is going to fill in the space we have above that last pink one we can actually see there on the top. So let that drop. And then there. We can't see any more of the previous pattern. Now I'm just going to add a couple more. Like I said, just to create a bit of a spacing. And I would also do this at the beginning of a braid, just like I said a couple of times. So there we go. This is fine enough. Now what I want to do is start adding in the flowers. So I'm going to then turn my disc to get to the next pair that I'm due to take. And then what we're going to start with is kind of basically make one flower on one side first. Because with the 8-strand braid you can't really make a flower on both sides at the same place. So the same point in the braid. If you want flowers on both sides you have to kind of alternate them. But you can also just keep flowers on one side. It's completely up to you. But then here, the gap I have over here, I'm just going to start adding in. So I make a flower there. So I'm going to start with a pink one, because I want the actual flower to be pink. So like that. That's going to drop down into the gap. It's going to be the very first bead to create the flower. So then on the very opposite one, because remember this is the one out of the same pair is going to be straight opposite side of the braid. So because we can't really make a flower on each side, we have to make the back of this flower black, or just the background colour. So I'm going to then take my black one, fill in that space. So those two opposite each other, we're going to have a flower on this side where the pink is. Move on to the next one. Now this is where we want to start looking as well at where our beads are going to be placed. So this is where getting familiar with the braid structure and the top of how that works as well up here is very crucial really, especially when you want to start doing a bit more complicated patterns. So if we have a look again, we have this square on the top just like I've been showing you throughout, formed by those 4 beads, where the one in the corner is just the pink one down here. Remembering this is the beginning of the flower, so we're going to have the flower on this side of the braid. So if we have a look at the next cord that I'm due to take, I'm going to bring that down from here. So that means the little space that we have on this side is going to be the next one that's going to be filled in. Now that is not going to be the pink one just yet, because you can see this little space is not going to be connected to that original pink one that we added first, and we need the whole flower to be connected with each other. So this one also has to be the background colour, because it's just a little bit too far back on the braid really. So add that bead in, let it drop down, and then when I add it in there, you can see it fills out that space, but it doesn't sit right up against the pink one. We have a bead in between, hence why it needs to be the background colour instead of the flower colour, pink one in my case here. But on the other hand, then on this side, we take the bottom right one in my case. When we bring that one over, we can see that that space we have down here is actually going to be filled in, and then end up being right next to the pink one that we've already added. So in this case, that means we have to add a pink one in to create that flower shape. So add a pink one, let it drop all the way down, and then when I tuck that in, you can see that that's going to sit right next to the other pink, and then basically build the bottom part of that flower. Moving on to the next one, the next pair here. So again, this is going to kind of be the side of the flower because it's on this side, so the one that we just added, the pink, is towards the side of the actual flower. So that means this cord that I'm taking now to fill in that gap is going to be more towards the back of the braid. So this one needs to be black as well. So the background colour really. Add it on, let it drop all the way down, and as you can see, it fills in that space. And yes, it's right up against the pink one, just like I said before, but it's more towards the back because obviously the flower's not going to be going all the way around the braid, just like I said before. So now the space in the same pair that we have on the opposite side here, that space is going to be right next to the pink one. So the very first pink one we added, basically think of that as the center of the flower, not the middle, but the kind of center where we're going to build on each side. So I'm going to take a pink one, and you can see how it's going to sit. Let it drop all the way down, so it fills in this gap, and then ends up like this. So you now have your 3 pink ones right next to each other there when you look from the top. And this is going to be the kind of one side of the flower. Moving on to the next pair. Now this is the point where, if you have a look, when I release this cord and bring it over, it fills in that gap. But what you'll be able to see is, knowing that how the flower is going to end up, this is actually going to be the center of the flower. So in this case, I'm just using my white ones for that. I'm going to add a white bead to that because I want that to stand out. So the center of the flower is a different color, just to show you how it looks. Drop that down. So basically we have the 3 first beads for the flower, and then we end up with the center one there. So if you look from the side, you can slowly start to see it build up, the flower building there, and then the very center of it. And the opposite side of the braid, so the one I'm due to take down here now, that one is going to be the very back, the back side of the flower basically, so the other side of the braid. So that means it needs to be the background color. In my case, the black one. Add that, let it drop all the way down, and that will be sitting straight opposite from the white one we just added, the center of the flower, like that. And as continuously throughout, you can see we always have those 4 beads on top and then just 2 on each side below the gap we're filling in basically. So now on this side, we need to fill in this gap. Now it can be a little bit tricky, say, with the flower ones here, because you maybe would think that this one you need to add a pink one, because it looks like it's right next to the previous pink one on this side. But we're kind of building the flower upwards like this. So if you added a pink one now, it would go towards the other side of the braid, not building on the same side of the braid. Therefore we need to add a black one. But that's the good thing as well, in my opinion, about doing it this way, is to say if you were to add a pink one here, and then just add a couple more beads, and then you turn it around and look at it and find out, oh, it doesn't look right, you just take a few off and then replace it with the right colour. So yes, it's a bit of, it does take time this, but it still doesn't take as long as if you were to thread all the cords full of beads and then have it wrong and then have to redo the whole thing. So on the other side here, this cord is going to fill in this gap, and I'm right next to the white one that's the center of the flower. So basically we need to fill out around that center of the flower now. So this one needs to be pink. Let it drop all the way down, tuck it in. So there we can see on the other side, building up the side of that white bead. Next one is again towards the opposite side of the braid from where the flower is. So that needs to be black. Like that. And then this side, this is going to again go right up against the space that we have is right next to the white bead. So we need to fill that one in with a pink one to keep building the flower shape. Let it drop down. And then we've almost completed the first flower. If we just turn it around, you can see it's almost complete. We're just basically missing one bead at the top there, which happens to be the one we need to do now. So you can see the gap that we have, we need to fill in now. It's right in between the two pink ones, but right above the white one, which is the center of the flower. So like that. So to finish off basically the whole circle around the white bead, that's the center of the flower, we need to add a very last bead of the color that we want the flower to be. Like that. So turn it around, there we have a full flower, complete. And obviously to finish this off, it's the opposite side of the braid, so that needs to be the background color. In my case, the black one. Tuck it in, and then you basically have the finished flower. So now obviously you can do what you then want. You can either continue and then make your next flower on the opposite side of the braid, but just give a little bit of space in between. I would just add a couple of black ones before I do that, just to not risk that any of the beads that I use for the flower colours were to touch each other or be too close together, because I want to make sure that the flower stands out. So like this, add in some more of the background colour. Like I said, you can then do one on the opposite side to kind of have flowers on both sides of the braid, so it doesn't matter what way it's facing. Or you could do it on just the one side here. So basically the same principle as the straight line down here. If you just want to have whatever pattern you're doing on kind of on one side of the braid, so you can see that's the outside, you can do it, just have a bit of spacing, make the next flower on the same side, a bit of space, make the same flower on the next side, make the next flower here on the same side. So it's completely up to you really how you want to do that. So I've now continued with the flower pattern here for a little bit, and I have my flowers coming on my braid on the other side here, and I've just done my flowers on one side, so the other side I've left just with the background colour. Like I said, you can do whatever you want to with that. This is just to demonstrate really. But then you have the polka dot pattern, the spirals, and then the flowers. So it's just to demonstrate really, you can do whatever you want. It's just to try and help you understand how to make your own pattern. So it's really about understanding the braid structure and then building it as you go, knowing where to put your beads. But even if you kind of end up putting one in the wrong place, you just undo it and then place it in the right place instead. So it's just kind of a work in progress. You build it as you go. And then what I would do now, if I was finished with the pattern and happy with it, now you can either choose to finish then off the braid that you've made, whatever you want to use it for, a bracelet or a necklace or whatever. What I will just do is continue making a section of my Kumihimo braid without the beads again, just like in the beginning, and naturally it will singe in here. Now personally, what I like to do before I do that is, in case I ever want to do whatever pattern that I've made again, or if I'm doing a tutorial or something for it, I obviously want to kind of be able to reference that pattern again. So what I like to do now, it's obviously up to you if you want to do this. It's a little bit extra work, but if you want to reference that pattern to be able to do it again, I really do recommend that you do this. Because then what you would then do is I would go around on all my cords here, make a knot on each end, or a couple of knots, just basically a stopper on the end here. So make some knots so it's big enough so your beads won't slip over it, so the knot can't go through them. So just make a few knots here if you need to. And I prefer not personally, I think it's a bit more secure. So I know my beads won't be able to get through this. So do that on all of my lengths of cord, and then what I'll do is basically take the whole thing apart again. So I'll just go in reverse, so say the beads that I've just added, instead of continuing to add my beads in, I'll basically undo them. So I'll take this one, this is the very last bead that I added, and then just basically go in reverse. So whenever I release a cord to go back again, I'll take the bead with me, like that, and then this is why I'm making sure that the knots that you make are big enough so they won't go through the holes on the beads. Slip that down, let it drop down like this, and then place your cord back in there, and then do the same with the next one. So like that. And then by doing this all the way around, continuing just to reverse back, basically going complete reverse every time you move your cord in the reverse way that you were building it on, you take the bead with you and let it drop all the way down. That way, as you go, what you'll find is your beads are going to stack up along your lengths of cord and then actually build up that pattern you originally see as when you're making a beaded Kumihimo braid, so that you're going to end up with the exact placement that you need to add your beads on your cords before you even start adding them into the braid. So then I'll take a picture of that, and then I can always refer back to that, so I don't have to keep doing this process every time. So the next time I do that, then I want to make the same pattern, all I have to do is look at that picture, get to the point where I'm going to start adding my beads, and then I can attach all my beads to all my lengths of cord according to that picture. And then that's obviously a quicker way of doing it, because then you already know what pattern that you're going to be doing. So that's just how I like to do it. I kind of make the whole thing up, undo it in reverse again, take a picture, and then obviously you can do it back up if you want to keep that piece that you've just made. But it's just so you're able to refer back to that pattern that you've come up with. That's what I find to be the best thing. And then once you've done that, you obviously want to finish off your braid in the usual way, however you want to finish it off, whatever you want to make it for. And then that's really how I personally make up my patterns for my Kumihimo braids with beads on. So then this is the little test piece that I ended up with. So my polka dots, the spirals there, and then the flowers at the end. So it's just to give you an idea of how you can make your own braid up basically with your pattern on your beads. So just how you need to place them. And what I find is the easiest and best way and most efficient as well to do it. So this is what I've ended up with. And then you can obviously do whatever you want. You can make many different types, and it can end up being anything you want really, many different patterns in general. So this is one I've done where basically I use the polka dots and the stripes together, but I've ended up then using colours that make it like the American flag. So it's just an example. Again, those two simple ones. And then the flowers that I also showed you, I've got a braid here where I did flowers on it, different coloured flowers, but I did it on both sides. So again, a little bit kind of the next step after the basic ones, but still you can get even more complicated than this. So once you kind of master the basics of doing these types of braids, making your own patterns, so the basic ones like this, you can move on to more complicated things like say this one. Again, this is just flowers along the way, and I've just done it on one side, but in this case I've then added in some long magatamas to make leaves for the flowers. So it can give you a completely different effect and kind of taking it to the next step. And also you can take it to a point where you're making completely different things. For instance, there's a braid I made here. There's little hedgehogs all the way along the braid. And again, all of these have been done with the exact same method, where I start out with having my short end of just the braid, and then I simply I get the beads ready that I know I want to use, and then I just along the way add one bead at a time to build up the pattern that I want. And say with this one was more difficult to make because even as I went, I did a lot of kind of adding beads. I wasn't quite happy, so I took them back off and then I added again. So there are some patterns, even doing this, that can be more difficult to make, but I still find that the way that I showed you is an easier way of doing it because you kind of have more control with it. So this is just some examples, because you can take it to completely other levels as well than just the basics, and just completely come up with your own patterns if you want to. So this is just how I found is the best way to make your own beaded Kumihimo patterns. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and found it useful, and that can maybe help you to make your own patterns as well. But otherwise, then thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this rainbow beaded Kumihimo bracelet. And this is what it looks like. So this is the final look of your bracelet. So you have all your rainbow colours, and the colours are kind of blending into each other, so it gives a really nice effect. And you have an extender chain on here. And then what I've done for this one is, you can obviously get your materials and make this yourself, but I've also put some kits together for this exact bracelet, and you'll be able to find them on my Etsy page and also on my website.